Mexico is rolling out a $5 billion mega-project that could rewrite global shipping routes and maybe even dethrone the Panama Canal. It's a bold attempt to carve a new trade artery straight through the narrow waist of Mexico. If it works, ships won't need Panama's locks. They'll cross Mexico by land, faster, cheaper, and without waiting in line. Sounds impossible? That's exactly what Panama said, until Mexico started building. Long before anyone dug the Panama Canal, Mexico already had the perfect shortcut between oceans. At its narrowest point, the Isthmus of Tehuantepec spans just 200 kilometers, a strip of land separating the Pacific and the Atlantic by less than a day's journey. For centuries, empires stared at this spot and saw one thing: opportunity. In the 1500s, Spanish explorers used it as a portage route for treasure ships. By the 1800s, engineers dreamed of slicing it open for a canal. The United States even considered digging here before choosing Panama. But Mexico's rugged terrain, tropical storms, and political turmoil kept that dream buried, until now. Fast forward to the 21st century. Global shipping is straining under its own weight. The Panama Canal is congested, droughts are lowering its water levels, and ships are lining up for days, burning fuel while they wait. Every hour lost costs millions. And suddenly, Mexico's ancient idea doesn't look so outdated. Enter the Interoceanic Corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, a $5 billion mega-project reviving a 120-year-old vision. Instead of carving a canal, Mexico is building a land bridge, a high-speed railway, twin deepwater ports, and a web of industrial hubs designed to move cargo across the country in record time. Goods will arrive on the Pacific, be transferred onto trains, and reach the Gulf of Mexico in under 6 hours, bypassing Panama's locks entirely. It's not just a logistics project, it's a geopolitical statement. For Mexico, this is about reclaiming a place on the world trade map. For global shippers, it's a lifeline, an alternative route at a time when bottlenecks and rising costs are threatening global supply chains. The corridor cuts through one of Mexico's poorest but most strategic regions. To make it work, engineers are rebuilding old railway lines abandoned for decades, reinforcing bridges, upgrading ports, and laying down fiber optics to turn the jungle into an industrial artery. It's bold, risky, and controversial. But it's the kind of gamble nations make when they want to change history. For more than a century, the Panama Canal has been untouchable. A 50-mile shortcut that redefined global trade. Every year, over 14,000 ships squeeze through its narrow locks, carrying roughly 6% of the world's commerce. Oil, grain, electronics, everything from Texas crude to Tesla parts flows through that tropical corridor. It's one of humanity's great engineering triumphs. But lately, it's starting to show its cracks. Climate change has turned the canal's greatest strength, its freshwater reservoirs, into its biggest weakness. Panama's Gatun Lake, which feeds the locks, has been drying up. In 2023, ships waited days, even weeks, as authorities were forced to cap transits and lighten cargo to conserve water. The canal that once symbolized global efficiency had become a traffic jam of supertankers. Meanwhile, shipping giants are desperate for alternatives. The Suez Canal, too far for trans-Pacific trade, the Arctic route, still frozen for most of the year, and building a second Panama Canal? Financially impossible. That's where Mexico spotted its chance. The Interoceanic Corridor offers something different: speed, without excavation. No locks, no freshwater constraints, and no waiting list. Cargo ships can dock at the new Salina Cruz port on the Pacific, unload containers directly onto freight trains, and send them racing to Coatzacoalcos on the Gulf Coast. From there, goods can continue to Europe, the US East Coast, or South America, shaving days off the usual routes. In theory, it's not just faster, it's smarter. The corridor ties into Mexico's growing network of industrial zones and free trade areas, many linked to North America's USMCA agreement. It's designed to serve the world's biggest economies without crossing the globe. If Panama was built for the 20th century's globalized trade, Mexico's plan is engineered for the 21st, decentralized, nearshored, and digital. And yet, the shadow of Panama looms large. Engineers there are fighting back, expanding capacity, and exploring desalination projects to keep the locks flowing. But even they know the tide is shifting. As shipping costs soar and geopolitical tensions fracture supply chains, companies are looking for resilience, not just convenience. For Mexico, that's the opening. It's not trying to kill the Panama Canal, it's trying to outsmart it. While Panama depends on one narrow waterway, Mexico offers a multimodal corridor that can grow, expand, and adapt. No locks to build, no mountain to cut, no single point of failure. Still, turning that idea into reality means battling geography, corruption, and time. The world is watching, the investors are cautious, and Panama, it's not about to surrender its crown quietly. The race to control the hemisphere's most strategic trade route has just begun, and Mexico's playing for keeps. On paper, the Interoceanic Corridor looks simple, a single railway connecting the Pacific and the Gulf. In reality, it's a century-old dream being rebuilt from the bones of history. The route between Salina Cruz and Coatzacoalcos was first laid in 1907, once Mexico's answer to the Panama Canal. For decades, it hauled freight across the isthmus until the world forgot it. The jungle didn't. Rails rusted, bridges sank, and the project vanished under vines. Now it's back, stronger, faster, digital. Engineers are rebuilding more than 200 bridges and culverts, relaying tracks designed for double-stack container trains, and cutting the cross-country trip to under 6 hours. At the Pacific end, Salina Cruz is becoming a deep water port with new cranes, automated yards, and dredged channels for post-Panamax ships. On the Gulf side, Coatzacoalcos is expanding with matching terminals and pipelines that plug directly into Mexico's national rail grid. Along the route, 10 industrial zones are rising from farmland and forest, special economic hubs, where factories, warehouses, and logistics firms will operate under free trade rules. Together, they'll turn the entire isthmus into one long conveyor belt of commerce. Below the surface runs a new nervous system. Fibre optic cables, smart sensors, and satellite-linked control centres tracking every train in real time. The challenge is relentless. Unstable soil, floods, and earthquakes force constant redesigns. But this time, Mexico's engineers aren't fighting nature, they're working with it. When finished, the corridor will move more than 1 million containers a year, not enough to replace the Panama Canal yet, but enough to prove one thing. Mexico's forgotten railway is no longer a relic. It's a rival. Every megaproject hides a bigger story, and Mexico's corridor isn't just about trade. It's about power. On the surface, it's an infrastructure project. Beneath that, it's a geopolitical chess move between the Americas, Asia, and the world's two economic giants, the United States and China. For Washington, the Interoceanic Corridor is more than a train, it's a firewall. The US wants to keep Latin American supply chains close, friendly, and out of Beijing's orbit. Through the USMCA trade pact, American companies can manufacture and move goods within North America tariff-free. A direct land bridge across Mexico makes that vision far more efficient, an express lane for reshoring factories and reducing dependence on overseas shipping. But Beijing has been watching too. China has spent decades investing in ports and rail lines across the Americas, from Brazil to Peru, as part of its global Belt and Road initiative. A foothold in Mexico's corridor would give Chinese companies a powerful link straight into the North American market. And Mexico, strategically located and hungry for investment, isn't turning anyone away. That's where things get complicated. The Interoceanic Corridor is being promoted as a neutral trade route, but neutrality in global logistics rarely lasts. Whoever finances, operates, and controls the flow of cargo ultimately controls influence. At home, Mexico's government sees the corridor as a legacy project, a way to lift one of its poorest regions into prosperity and cement President López Obrador's vision of economic sovereignty. But critics warn of corruption, slow progress, and environmental risks in one of the country's most fragile ecosystems. Still, no one can ignore the timing. With global trade shifting and climate threats rising, every nation is racing to build resilience. For Mexico, the corridor is both a gamble and a declaration. It's no longer content to be the middleman between the US and the rest of the world. It wants to be the bridge itself. Who wins? That depends on who controls the flow of cargo, money, and data once the first train rolls through the jungle. Every great megaproject looks unstoppable from above, but the real test lies beneath the rails. In the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, the challenges begin with the ground itself. The region sits on unstable clay and fault lines that shift with every rainy season. Entire sections of track have to be lifted, drained, or rebuilt to survive floods and tremors. It's not the kind of place that forgives mistakes. Then there's the human terrain. The corridor cuts through indigenous lands, Zapotec, Mix, Zaca, communities with deep roots and little trust in government promises. Some welcome the jobs and infrastructure. Others fear displacement, deforestation, and cultural loss. Protests have stalled sections of construction, forcing engineers to negotiate as much with villagers as with geology. Security is another fault line. Southern Mexico has long been a corridor of a different kind, one used by smugglers and cartels. Protecting trains, ports, and cargo from organized crime means militarizing sections of the route, which raises its own risks. The government insists the military's involvement ensures discipline and transparency. Critics call it something else, control. And hovering over it all is politics. The corridor's future depends on funding and leadership far beyond the engineer's reach. A change in administration could slow or reshape the project overnight. Still, progress continues. Every kilometre built feels like a small victory over geography, history, and bureaucracy. For Mexico, the corridor is more than rails and steel. It's a test of national will. The question isn't whether it can be built, it's whether it can endure. For years, the Interoceanic Corridor existed mostly on blueprints and promises. But that's changing fast. By 2025, the first full test runs began. Freight trains rumbling across Mexico's narrow waist, carrying containers from the Pacific to the Gulf in just under 6 hours. What once seemed like political theatre now looks real. The dream that outlived empires is finally moving at 60 miles per hour. At Salina Cruz, new gantry cranes rise against the Pacific horizon, lifting containers from ships straight onto double-stacked trains. At Coatzacoalcos, the Gulf port hums with synchronized motion, vessels arriving as the rail cars roll in, cranes swiveling like clockwork. What used to be a sleepy, forgotten region now sounds like industry waking up. But this first success is only half the battle. The corridor must prove it can compete on scale, not just speed. Panama moves hundreds of millions of tons each year. Mexico's line can handle a fraction of that, for now. The challenge ahead isn't just building infrastructure, but winning trust. Shipping giants, insurers, and logistics companies will need to see consistency. Not just a shortcut, but reliability. Mexico's government is betting that once the trains prove their efficiency, private investors will pour in, expanding capacity, automation, and industrial zones along the route. Already, interest from Asian, American, and European companies is growing, drawn by the corridor's promise of stability and proximity to US markets. Yet beneath the optimism, the tension lingers. One delay, one derailment, one corruption scandal could derail global confidence. Mexico's new artery of trade runs on more than rails. It runs on credibility. Still, the symbolism is powerful. A century after the world chose Panama over Mexico, the tables may be turning. This time, no canal, no locks, no water, just rails, steel, and resolve. The corridor's first freight train is more than a shipment. It's proof that Mexico's long-forgotten shortcut between oceans isn't just back on the map, it's rewriting it. Every generation dreams of reshaping the map. A century ago, it was Panama, a canal carved through mountains and jungle, a symbol of engineering defiance. Today, it's Mexico, resurrecting a forgotten path across the land, turning what once seemed like a weakness into an advantage. But unlike Panama's miracle of concrete and water, Mexico's corridor is a miracle of timing. It doesn't cut through the earth, it connects what already exists. Ports, rails, highways and people stitched together into something larger than the sum of its parts. If it succeeds, this will be the hemisphere's second canal, not one that ships sail through, but one they cross over. A silent steel river that can't dry up, flood, or be held hostage by weather. Its flow will depend on logistics, not rainfall. Its power will come not from gravity, but from coordination, a different kind of engineering altogether. And yet the paradox remains. The more we control nature and trade, the more we depend on both. Mexico's new artery of commerce is bold, but fragile, a line drawn across a volatile landscape built on shifting ground, both geological and political. Still, progress often begins this way, with a gamble. Panama once gambled everything on a 50-mile trench through the tropics. Mexico is now betting on 200 kilometers of rails through uncertainty. Both defied logic. Both changed the world. For now, the Interoceanic Corridor stands as proof that global trade is evolving, away from single choke points and toward networks. The oceans no longer decide where commerce flows. Decisions, data, and design do. The real question isn't whether Mexico can rival Panama. It's whether the world is ready for a second canal, one that doesn't divide continents, but connects them. Because somewhere between two oceans, beneath the heat, the rain, and the rails, a quiet revolution has already begun.